whiteboard. And so we want you all to imagine that you're part of this coastal community. It's vulnerable to floods and cyclones. And I want you to imagine, and if you can, write, who might be the most important people in your life, you as a member of this community, okay? It doesn't have to be the most important people in your personal life. If you want to go in that direction, it's fine, but I would recommend that we stick to here. So who might be the most important people in your life and in your community? So please write that down or draw it if you want. Next, what might be your most important asset? What might be your favorite place in this community? What might be your livelihood? So take a minute if you want to sit and because you have the desk, feel free. So take a minute to imagine this and feel free to draw it, write it down, and then when you're done, come back to the circle and we'll go to the next part of this section. So for those online participants, feel free to put it on the whiteboard. You can draw, you can write. You can use hypothetical names as you wish. So. Right, so again, most important person maybe, or important people in the community, most important asset, maybe something of personal value, and a livelihood. So just bullet points, it could be words or drawing. And yeah, good. I see that the online participants are pitching in. Good, feel free to use images as well. All right, so let me invite you all to reconvene here to the circle. You have to, yeah. So let's all get back into the circle. You have your sheets of paper with the most important people in the community, livelihood, assets, etc. Right? So I'm going to ask you to fold your sheet of paper so that you can see what's written, right? Fold it once.
So you can say camera counts.
Yeah, fold. Yeah, so that you cannot see it.
Oh,
And fold it once more. Okay. And now, I do apologize for this part of the game, but consider that this is a learning experience. I'm going to ask you all to rip that into as many pieces as you can and throw it in with a middle.
I'm sorry to the online audience as well. This is part of the game.
Yes. And for the online, okay, so throw what you have in the middle here. Oh. All right, so we have here two communities, right? One here and one online. Okay, so what just happened?
Only danced is for you.
a disaster or a tsunami hit or something.
So all we cared about.
Yeah.
How did it feel? Hard. Yeah. And I think part of our trainings is that we're also, of course, we're humanitarians and we want to promote empathy, but this is what happens on a minor scale. It affects us in the room. But this is what we're dealing with when we're talking about disasters and when we can have anticipatory action. So now let's imagine then that this happens. Can you help me distribute some? So hold some pieces here. Yes. Okay, so let's imagine that this is what? If you just sit back.
The response.
Aid, right?
Yes.
Humanitarian aid response. How does it feel?
Haphazard.
Inadequate, I would say. I mean, I don't know what I'm getting, or what I'm getting is, you know, like, it's gonna help me to reveal my life.
Yeah. Anyone else? So now, we're gonna go around and we're going to, wait, sorry,
We need to
from
use,
the online participants. How
We-
did it feel here in this? Having everything destroyed and given a few bits and pieces of what was left. Hello, can you hear me? So I'm asking also for the online participants to put on the chat, how did it feel having everything destroyed and then giving bits and pieces back to you? So we'll take the answers here, surprising and depressing at the same time. Thank you, Michael. Anyone else? It's devastating. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So now Christina is going to go around and she's going to give you a piece of tape. And for the online participants, we'll have some parts restored from the original board. So try to put things back together. No, and maybe think what this might represent. So take 30 seconds, try to put something back together from this cyclone that just happened. See if you can glue things back together, make sense of what's there. All right. Rainy season started again. Thank you. Well, now again. Eso pasa. Okay, so back to the circles. It is. My methods can be questionable. All right. What happened here in this round?
We're trying to reveal something, but.
with the microphone, please.
Use the microphone.
Hello?
Yeah, we're trying to rebuild something, but as you said, rainy season happened again, so all is once more destroyed, sort of. So we're starting from zero again.
Anyone else? Solid.
It's
Yeah.
destroyed and it has no sense to try to again reconstruct.
How are you feeling?
I mean,
worked
it
quite well.
yeah, but it didn't make sense
Yeah.
since the beginning. So
Okay, you got
I
some.
didn't reconstruct very well.
Okay. Annoying, yeah, it can be.
Disrespected.
Yeah. So the message that we want to bring here, maybe we can go back to the PowerPoint. Is that when we're talking about why we do anticipatory action, right? Of course, here we're simulating what can happen in a disaster. And we know that it's a lot more serious when it's, you know, people actually losing their livelihoods, their assets. Yeah, you're back. The people that matter to them. This is why we're doing anticipatory action. It's not to say that all the other parts of the disaster management cycle are not relevant, but how can we the clicker working?
It should be.
It's not. So if you can click
Go
there.
next.
So how can we act before a disaster impacts? We know that we cannot prevent cyclones from happening. We know that floods will continue to happen. We know that it's not a matter of if, but when. So this is why we are doing what we're doing with anticipatory action, which we're going to get into the details. But we know that with climate change, frequencies, magnitudes are increasing. They're only getting harder to manage. So how can we get to these communities and try to mitigate and prevent this from happening? It's still maybe going to happen, but how can we make it less painful from what we just saw here happening in the room and in our online board as well? Does that make sense? So here, I know this is it can be a triggering game, but it is for us to set the tone of why we're here, especially when we are at headquarters, sometimes far away from where these things are happening. How can we then figure out how to work together? And this is what it's all about. And this is what we're going to be talking about today. So thank you for participating. I do apologize if anyone did not like it. I know it's a bold thing to do, but it's also us trying to make that connection of what happens. So thank you for participating. So with that, I'm going to pass the microphone to Christina to start getting us on board with anticipatory action.
Thank you. Perfect. Maybe we try the clicker again. It's worked previously, but of course not anymore. Could you go to the next slide?
Do you know how to do it? Should I just
Yeah.
press enter or this one? No. No, let me ask Shona.
Yeah, okay. But we can start without the slides. As we are already standing and are in action mode, let's continue doing that. What do you think when, or what comes to your mind when you think of anticipatory action? Take like maybe 1 minute to reflect in pairs here in the room. We can clean it up later. And for the people online, you can just write it on the whiteboard. So what comes to your mind when you hear the term anticipatory action? Take some time to reflect. Or in the group. You can reflect in pairs with your neighbor. What comes to your mind when you think of AA? And the mentee, write it in the word clouds online. All right. So let's collect some responses. Maybe from the room. What do you came up with?
The art of prevention is the art of be living, no?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, more than you prevent, more possibility to life you have.
Yeah. So reduce suffering in the end. What did you come up with?
Planning. I was thinking ahead.
Thinking ahead, very good. In the room, in the online participants, we have, for example, reducing impacts, predict, trigger, life-saving, education, forecast. Yeah, so we have already all some understanding and ideas what it is, but we really want to see today where it fits and what it exactly is. So maybe you can remember some of those words and check in the end with yourself, Are they fitting in AA or are they not fitting? All right. Could we go back, please, to the slides? And now let's start. You see here numbers from 1 to 8, and those present the DRM, the disaster risk management cycle. So 1 being long-term resilient development, 8 being recovery. So we go from 1, long-term resilient development, preparedness, 5 is the shock or the hazard happening, 6 response and recovery. And now I would ask you to stand where you think anticipatory action fits in this disaster risk management cycle. The online people can just put a dot on where they think that it fits. You can just stand close to the number you think it's correct. Yeah, just move. Yeah, just 15 seconds. Yeah, it's a quick.
Here's the numbers.
Yeah.
The numbers stay,
Yeah.
you move towards the number you think is correct.
Right. All right. We have in the room, yeah. All right, you're standing in between 3 and 4. Okay. You're not standing, okay. Yeah, to take a wild guess. I mean, nothing is wrong. All right. Let's say 1, 2, 3, and we are done. In the room, we have most people standing around 3, 4, leaning towards 5, so to the hazard. We have some people in the long-term resilient development. Online, it's similar between 2 and 3. Would you mind sharing? I don't want to put you now on the spot because you said you're not moving, but why you think it could be between 1 and 2?
I think it's between 1 and 2 because ultimately resilience or being able to be effective in responding to shock cannot be just short term, but has to be built into a longer term plan.
All right, thank you very much. And maybe someone from the online participants who put their dot between 4 and 5 would be willing to share.
Can unmute yourself and.
Yeah, you can unmute yourself and speak.
Write it in the chat.
Or write it in the chat and we move on in the room. Are you standing at 6?
I was trying to cover as many as possible.
Okay. Could you explain why you think covering as many as possible?
Anticipatory action is part of the whole cycle from 1 to 8, from planning to knowing when those actions should be implemented to recovery and understanding how to adapt those plans in the future for the next event.
All right. Perfect, thank you. Well, I'm gonna give you the the solution without the real. Correct is exactly 4. Anticipatory action is in between preparedness. So we have a huge crowd here and also online, which is standing quite correctly. So anticipatory action fits after preparedness and before the shock happens. So we have, it's part of the disaster risk management, but why? We will look at later. If you like, you can take a seat and now we will have some presentation and you can relax and listen. All right. Could we go back to the next slide, please? Okay, what is anticipatory action? Also, next one. Maybe I tested. Next, yeah, all right. We have a definition for anticipatory action. Acting ahead of predicted hazardous events to prevent or reduce impacts on lives and livelihoods and humanitarian needs before they fully unfold. This works best when activities, as well as a trigger or decision-making rules are pre-agreed and decisions are made to guarantee the fast release of pre-agreed financing. So that's a very long definition, but it has all components of AA quite in it. But we will look at it closer so you understand it actually. Next slide, please. Okay, we have the parameters. So what does it mean? We want to reduce potential human suffering before a hazard strikes. So human suffering as well as livelihoods. The second one, the actions are always based on forecasts or predictive analysis. So we act because we have the data to act on it. Next one. The actions are implemented before the hazard occurs. So that's very important. It's always before. It's not recovery or response. And last but not least, we have pre-agreed funding mechanisms. Those mechanisms must be in place so we actually get quick funding, which is also at our place before the hazardous event happens. So to sum this up, this approach is quite a shift in humanitarian traditional response or action because it invites us to act proactively before something happens and to use data and risk analysis to work. So it's a big shift in humanitarian work. Okay, but now what does it entail, anticipatory action? First of all, we need a trigger. Perfect. A trigger is always based on impact-based forecasting. So it's something which tells us what is going to happen when and where. Very important. We need a trigger. Next one. We need, of course, anticipatory actions. We often use the term, but the action is the actually very important part of it. An early action or so-called anticipatory action. Those actions are meant to reduce the humanitarian suffering, the impact. It's actions which are quite clear to do. It could be handing out water bottles. It can be strengthening homes. It can be very, very different actions, which are, of course, contextualized, which are based on the context we are in and we'll have the time for. And again, last, the financing mechanisms. It's one of the very important parts. We need the pre-agreed funding, which enables the disbursement of money before the disaster impact. So we have those three building blocks, and all those blocks are summarized in a plan. Some organizations call it an early action plan, others a protocol, others call it an anticipatory action plan, but they all are the same. It's a plan which tells us which decisions are taken when and what is happening and what is financed by it. So that's a really important part of it. Which is also really important to have in those plans is to have proper meal plans. So we generate evidence so we can collect data and actually see, does it work or doesn't it work, what could be improved, etc. And those are the very important building blocks. Please remember, triggers, anticipatory actions, financing mechanisms, make up for the plan for the delivery of anticipatory actions. Thank you. Next slide, please. Because I mentioned it before, it's the funding mechanisms. Today, we have different organizations which are working on anticipatory action, having different funding mechanisms. Those are mostly for their own organizations. So the IFRC have the TREF, which is funding national societies. We have for United Nations organizations, the SURF or the World Food Programme also have their own. We have the START network. We have someone here from there who have the START ready, where partners of the START network can get funding. Maybe you can give us more intel later. And there's also some funding from governments or project fundings, but in general, there are not so many funding resources yet. but also we maybe talk about later in the challenges. Next slide, please. Well, we are interactive, so we play a game again and test a little bit your knowledge. We will be competitive, and you will play again against the online participants, and the online participants play against the in-person participants. It's a very easy game and it goes quickly. You will see on the next slides a hazard, and you will tell me if this should be covered or is covered by anticipatory action or not. In the room, just a show of hands. When you say yes, it's covered, and the majority in the room will stick. The online participants can vote, and then we will see if the room had more yes, or the percentage, kind of, because that would be, if not, unfair. And then we go ahead. Okay, we will do a test run. It's quick, yeah? Okay, next slide, please. A drought. Okay, in the room we have a majority saying it's covered by AA. Online, I would say it's also a majority. You know, let's give both a point.
Okay, so just try to tally.
So why is it covered by AA? Does anyone have the answer?
We have an example.
Yes, so basically in the model you just showed, so yes, you can predict it. There are triggers for drought. You can include it in your plan, basically. And of course, there's a financing mechanism that goes with it, so it fits the model. And then, of course, you do evaluation, etc.
Yeah, great.
Maybe just add, maybe something we may discuss later, that also with the draft, like colleagues rightly mentioned, you know, given that also this type of hazard, then it's the length of it give ample time to agency, to media offices and others to really understand what would be the worst peak into the let's say seasonality. While it's way more difficult, we'll talk about challenges when we speak about and we have to deal rapid onset disaster.
Yeah, we will come to that later also. So let's check for the next one. Floods. Okay, in the room we have not so many thinking that's covered by AA.
So raise your hand so that
Yeah,
it can be
sure.
clear whether you're voting, is it included or not?
We can discuss like uncertainties also. And and online, it seems to be a majority for yes. So I give the point to the online participants. Floods are covered by anticipatory actions. Also, we have again, it's predictable. It's based on a forecast, and the time between the forecast and the hazard striking is long enough to actually have actions. Maybe if you want to, because you were uncertain about it, you can check it.
I agree with what you said for the most part, but I think there are also different types of flooding where that's not always the case. So.
Yeah, you're right. There's some Beispiel. Now I suddenly jumped into German. There are, for example, flash floods, or you know, where it's more difficult, or the lead time is a lot shorter. So of course, those are just very basic examples. But you're right. Okay, so 2-1 for online. Earthquakes. Who thinks they can be covered by AA? Yeah, in the room, no one thinks it can be covered. And online, we have a little bit of a yes, no situation. Maybe if someone online, Irene, if you're willing to speak and you could explain why you think it could be covered by AA.
Yes, of course. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I think it can be predicted because you would have certain signs of it, right? There are certain institutes that would be monitoring that, and then you could, you know, react on that trigger.
Okay, thank you. well, earthquakes are not covered by anticipatory action because from the forecast or to know the moment it's happening, it's very short time, mostly seconds, until the disaster impact happens, the shock happens. So this time would be too short to actually act or also receive the money to act. So it's a no, and I would give the point to the in-person people here. And next slide. Cold waves, yes or no? In the room, we have a majority for yes. Same as online. And let's then go quickly to the, it's again a point for both of rooms. Yes, cold waves are similar to droughts. They can be forecasted, they are predictable. We have enough time, lead time to act. So it's good to act on it, or it's feasible to do anticipatory action. Next one. Cyclones or hurricanes or typhoons, all of those disaster types. We have in the room also again a majority for yes. And online as well, I would say. So both rooms get a point because cyclones are possible to predict and there's time or to monitor. You can see the movement of cyclones, hurricanes, etc. and then see when it most probably going to strike and you can act accordingly. And I think with that we go to the last one. Or the okay, volcanic ash. That's a little bit of a trick one. I give you 3 seconds more to think. We have some no's. In the room, we have 1 yes. Same as earthquake. Someone, Mary is asking from online. Okay, so I would.
There's some, there's I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's why we're here. Okay, so because there was both the rooms were kind of split, no one gets a point. We're strict. Okay, volcanic ash, yes, can be covered by anticipatory action. It's quite interesting because we can see, or a volcanic eruption can what not be covered by anticipatory action, but the ash actually can be predicted and there's enough time to act. And that's really important, the time to act. So if the volcano erupts, you can, for example, hand out masks or something, which could be anticipatory action. Yeah, here we have in the chat someone is, how about displacement caused by conflict? Maybe we can discuss that later a little bit. And there is a session tomorrow, I think also at 11 or in the noon, about exactly that subject. So maybe check out the website. It's also co-hosted by the Anticipation Hub, GRC and DRC. So maybe that. Someone else is asking about heat waves. Does someone have to answer for the question, are heat waves covered by anticipatory action?
Yes, I would say yes, because you can also predict with certain, meteorological data, certain temperatures reaching. So one of them very often is, for instance, heat waves in Pakistan that happened, let's say, so that is covered by AA.
That is correct. Heat waves are covered. It's similar to the cold waves or to the droughts. It's actually quite a long lead time. Okay, next slide, please. Oh, there's one more. Sorry. A cholera outbreak. Yes, yes, yes. In the room, we have a majority for yes. Online as well. Oh, someone saying not sure, also a valid answer. Okay, we give to both again a point. I guess the majority in the room and online was yes. And you're right, cholera outbreaks are possible to be covered by AA or other disease outbreaks as well, because we can forecast it, the movement of the disease. And so we have time to act. All right, so now you know which or a part of which hazards are covered by anticipatory action. Now you have heard me also quite sometimes say the word lead time, but what is that actually? The lead time is the window between the trigger and the impact. So the window we have for acting to implement something, the anticipatory actions. We have already said droughts have a very long lead time. So you have quite a lot of time to act. It's sometimes up to months. And very quick ones, earthquakes, tsunamis, the lead time is too short to act. Okay, I think it's, you can go to the next slide. Yeah. All right, now we do a knowledge check. How is anticipatory action different from traditional humanitarian response? I will ask in the room, you can think about it a second, and people online, you can write it in the chat. So what is the difference between traditional humanitarian response and anticipatory action? Does someone has an idea? Okay, someone is writing in the chats. The response is before the hazard hits and not after. Funding comes after the crisis. No, it should hopefully come before the crisis. Or I mean, yeah, in the traditional humanitarian response, it would come after. With AA, it comes before. Any ideas in the room?
Yes, traditional humanitarian response is sort of not proactive very often, but reactive. So we see, you know, very slow response in terms of even funding disbursement, let's say. So it's, I would say that's the main point there.
Yeah. I'm not sure where disaster preparedness fits into that, but for countries, again, I have to refer to my experience in Jamaica. Where we have cyclones annually, there is a response mechanism. So when the disaster is about to happen, and after it happens, there is a lot of action, both to protect human life and to respond. So I'm not quite sure. And for me, that fits into the wider umbrella of traditional humanitarian response.
Yeah. That's correct. We will also look later a bit again at the disaster risk management and the contingency plans and where and why there is the difference. The difference to now with anticipatory action is really that it uses that little window of time and be proactive. And what you said is part of the preparedness and also of the contingency plans. So, but this one is more for disasters which do not maybe happen on a yearly or regular basis. But we will look at it later again. Next knowledge check question. Okay, what are the building blocks of anticipatory action? Again, you can write in the chat.
Triggers.
Yes.
Level 3.
If you have them.
Funding. And no, I can't remember what the middle one was. Action. Yes.
Correct. We have the trigger, the anticipatory or early actions, which make it sometimes easier to remember, and the funding mechanisms, the pre-agreed funding. The pre-agreed is very important. Okay, I want you to remember those things. We have a shift in humanitarian action. So it's really a paradigm shift, proactive versus reactive, and the 3 building blocks: trigger, anticipatory action, and pre-agreed funding. Next slide, please. Okay, so first, the key messages about AA. It is part of the disaster risk management, what you just said, that's correct. And it bridges the gap in the disaster risk management cycle between preparedness or mitigation and humanitarian response and recovery. It's very important that it's part of it, but it's a new point of it. Okay, next one. All actions are based on forecasts. That's very important. We need the data, we need the analysis. It's forecast based. Next one. We have talked about it as well. The actions are implemented before the hazard strikes. And last, anticipatory action is not and never will be a substitute for long-term investments or response in disaster risk management. This is also very important part. It will not be a substitute or anything like that. And with that, I'm over and I hand back to Marcella.
Thank you, Christina. So now we're going to go over how do we put this all into practice, right? We've covered the building blocks, but how do we make it work? So this is what we're going to focus on in the next 20 minutes or so. So just a quick recap, building blocks. We have, click please, we have the triggers. So we need to do a thorough risk analysis to understand what the triggers would be for impacting. The selection of anticipatory actions. You might hear other jargon of forecast-based actions, early actions, that's where it falls under. So we want to reduce the humanitarian impact, prevent, mitigate that suffering as much as possible. Finally, we have the pre-agreed funding mechanism, which allows for the funding to come in once you have the trigger so that you can act on the actions in the middle. All of this, again, goes into an early action protocol or an anticipatory action plan in which you have all the information of pre-agreements and who does what, when, where, once the trigger is activated. And of course, a big part of anticipatory action is that we want to generate evidence so that we can scale it, so that we can get more funding, and then have our meal mechanisms in place to prove that it's worth being proactive rather than reactive as traditional humanitarian response. So far, are we all together in this? And I know it's repetitive, but if there's anything that we want you to walk out of the foundations of anticipatory action today, is getting these building blocks so that we can better understand what anticipatory action is and where it falls within the disaster management cycle. So over to the next slide, please. This is just another visual representation. Here we have the disaster risk management cycle. So you have your preparedness phase, you have anticipatory action, that is that window in between the forecast and the trigger, where you see up there on the left hand side, leading to the shock or the disaster impact. Anything that comes afterwards or during is then your early response and recovery, as we know. Okay, so what we're going to cover now in the next 20 minutes is how do we get this blue arrow here, anticipatory action, to work? How do we develop frameworks for anticipatory action? Next slide, please. All right, so we're going to look at this framework. If you're an organization that you're interested in getting into anticipatory action, how do you go about it? So next slide, please. You will want to develop an anticipatory action framework. You might have seen this image already around the internet from the IFRC. Mind you that any organization that wants to start an anticipatory action framework will generally follow these steps, okay? So we can imagine this as a 6-step process. I know that you see 9 steps here, and I'll explain why we have the 9. But in general, your first step is you want to do a little bit of scoping. Will it be feasible to implement anticipatory action in country X? It starts by understanding the risks, doing the analysis. Is there interest from the government counterparts? Is there buy-in? And doing a very thorough analysis of what have been the hazards, the impacts in the region, what's the history there. Next, we want to identify the forecasts, right? So we want to understand what is our capacity in country, as well as with national Met services, regional, global, so that we can identify the forecasts. Are the hazards that we want to work with forecastable? If they're not forecastable, then it's not going to fall into our building blocks of anticipatory action, right? Because that's one of the parameters. Once we have the understanding of, can these hazards be forecastable? Do we have the data, the science to back it up? We are then looking at the definition of impact levels. So when we have a certain level of impact for cyclones, wind speed, whatever, what are the impacts that has in a particular country, a particular province, district, region, etc. Once we have this defined, then we need to understand, what are we going to do about it? What can be done in that window that we defined? So if we define that for cyclones, for instance, you have 3 days to act. When you have the trigger or the forecast to the landfall of the cyclone, what can be done in these 3 days? Now, we need to think that in this process, the funding is also being dispersed, and thinking of all the logistics that goes into that before we get to distributing anything. So whatever actions we select, we need to make sure that they're relevant to the community, right? We want to mitigate, prevent human suffering, but they need to be feasible. It needs to be viable within that window that we have, whether it's 3 days, 5 days, or months leading to the hazard impact. Once we have all this information, so steps 1, 2, 3, and 4, this is when we develop our early action protocol or anticipatory action plan, because now you have all the information to put there, and within your organization or government system, you would have then who does what, when, where. And in that process, you're also looking at the financial model setup. So that's step 6 over there, on how much is this going to cost? Not only the costs of the actions in that window of 3 days, 5 days, but also before. Do we need to train people? And that's where there's a bit of an overlap with preparedness, because you're also training and pre-positioning items. So this is where you can see a bit of overlap. I had seen someone online asking, what's the difference with preparedness? So of course there's an overlap. It's part of the disaster management cycle as well. Doesn't work in silos. So once you have the financial model set up, what does that mean? Different organizations have their different mechanisms for funding. So if you are in the World Food Program, for example, they have their own internal funding. They have their own process on how that's going to be dispersed and reaching the specific country. They also have their own funding caps and limitations. Welcome, have a seat. So once we have all of that into our action plans, then we monitor. Now, usually our action plans have about a 5-year maybe lifespan, and then it should be revisited every time you activate to see if the triggers were correct, if the actions made sense, if it had impact. But then we monitor for the forecasts. As we saw in our activities earlier, it's not a matter of if the hazard will happen, it's a matter of when, right? And if it's a hazard that's never going to happen, then, you know, go back to step 1. There's a reason why we selected and started anticipatory action. Eventually, we will have the trigger. And the trigger is the go moment of start acting within that window of time that we have. And from there, we implement our early actions, so step 9. And then after we've implemented anticipatory action, and after it's safe to go into the area that has been impacted by the hazard, then we can start looking at what was the impact of our actions. Was it better, the same, or worse? when we compare to the response, so that we can then generate the evidence that it makes sense to invest in anticipatory action rather than being in the response side. But again, as Christina mentioned, it's not a substitute. We will always need response, especially with the scales and magnitudes of the hazards and disasters that we're experiencing worldwide. So the process of setting up an anticipatory action framework is not something that, oh, I want to do it, and in 5 months, we're going to have it all set up with government and other partners. If you're a small NGO, for example, and you want to work, it does take effort. And we usually, from our experience with our partners, it takes about 1 to 2 years to set this up. It's not that you're going to do it all on your own, and we're going to talk about this in a bit, but it requires stakeholder engagement, it requires lobbying, it requires the buy-in and collaboration, especially if you're a small organization. You cannot be everywhere. So how do we make the most of scaling together? And this is something that we're going to be discussing in the final part of our presentation. So, questions before I go to the next slide. Is this making sense? Yeah. Okay. Off we go to the next slide. So, as you can imagine, to set up that framework, as I mentioned before, we cannot do it alone. It requires effort. So don't just assume that you're the first one in the country that you're implementing and no one else have thought about it. It is an initiative that's scaling across the world. And you might want to first check, does the government have this set up? What are the local, national, international NGOs in the region doing? So that you don't have to reinvent the wheel, so that you don't have to invest more money or funds than you have to doing another thorough analysis when maybe that's already been done and there's maybe already a working group or a platform where this is being shared. You want to partner with the hydrometeorological organizations, right? So that we get the science right. We want to obviously involve the government. And eventually we're going to talk about the importance of embedding anticipatory action in government systems so that it's part of the disaster management cycle as they have set up. It also involves academia, the Red Cross societies, UN organizations, other humanitarian organizations, private sector entities. I think that one we might need to see how to engage more with private sector. If anyone here that's worked with anticipatory action in the field has an example, that would be more than welcome to share here in this platform on how can we engage more with the private sector. Anyone have? I say this because we always hear about this in project proposals, engage, but if anyone has concrete examples, that would be great.
Telecommunication.
Okay, telecommunications industry and private sector. Good, yeah. Anyone else?
Yes, insurance companies as well.
So here, I'll let you speak for that.
No, I guess from our experience at Star Network, insurance companies, because a lot of the risk modeling is done mimicking the insurance industry sector. So yeah, big insurance companies are quite interested in that, so they can support you as well.
Excellent, thank you. Right, and how do we then pitch that win-win for both sides?
That's another conversation.
All right, great. Okay, yes, please.
Just an experience from the Philippines, engaging private sector. We have groups of private sector companies coming together, creating like a resilience hub of some sort. And they also, one group, PDRF, have their own disaster center somewhere created, but mainly they began as coming together to protect their own businesses. Then eventually it extended to really engaging themselves in different coordination platforms in the Philippines. There are like two sets of groups. So I guess it's also a matter of trying to see how connecting the dots of who are doing what, where, how, when.
Excellent. And I keep telling my colleagues, with every disaster comes an opportunity. And when we talk about disasters, as we saw, no one can, we're all affected by it in one way or another. Some organizations or private sectors or others might be more resilient, but they're still impacted. And if I can give the latest examples of the fires in California and all these mansions being burned down, we are all part of this unfortunate set of events that happen. So the main point here is that we need to collaborate. There is a lot of information out there. There are a lot of actors out there that are already doing great stuff. So how can we work and add to that rather than compete and try to do our own thing, right? On to the next. And I see just online here, warehousing and logistics companies that can be engaged in remote area. Good. Logistics also when we have to move items around, whether it's when we're implementing the actions or pre-positioning items, etc. So those are all great examples. Okay, so we're going to be doing another activity. We want to look at how do we select the anticipatory actions or the forecast-based actions, early actions, however you want to call it. Essentially, when we look at these three circles here, we have actions that happen prior to a crisis, when we're talking about your long-term resilience development, disaster risk reduction activities, prevention, preparedness. So maybe who can give me some examples of what kind of activities fall under the yellow circle? And participants online, also feel free to put on the chat. What might be some preparedness or disaster risk reduction activities that you know about? Your typical contingency plans. Yes. What else?
Restocking of different materials you might need or you might use for your own programming, depending on the mandate of your organization.
Okay, good. Pre-positioning of stock, restocking, community action plans. Anyone here in the room? What do you do in Jamaica for cyclones?
Well, we do a lot of awareness raising, particularly for people who live in high-risk areas.
Excellent, right? So you're doing awareness raising, looking at your risk maps, getting people ready. What happens during or post-emergency? What are some activities that we know in our system? During and post-emergency, the life-saving humanitarian response. What are some typical activities that we see? Yeah, Carlos.
For us, it's very important education. Basically to the territorial population located in the places which could be any hurricane, in our case, not or headquarters, etc.
And when the hurricane passes, what happens?
After pass it, everything already gone on. So crashes we find it.
So what kind of activities do you do to help mitigate this?
To recover is the next mitigation for that. But for us, the priority is in the prevention and readiness, preparation, basically, through education.
Yeah, so education, awareness raising, those are all big things, yes?
Certainly, the immediate thing after a hurricane is clearing the roads, restoring electricity, looking for those who might be lost, doing an account of who is missing.
Exactly, yes. So the life-saving and then getting the basic needs, evacuation of people and livestock, cash assistance.
They're actually for it's giving multi-purpose cash assistance as a preparation. And then during or post emergency, it's provisions, the basic needs of people in that situation. and then also a lot of needs assessment happening, ongoing needs assessment, just to make sure that provisions are given that are tailored fit to the affected people.
Excellent, right on. So those are some examples of the before and the after. Now, what we're going to look at is what are the activities that we can do within that window from the trigger to the disaster landfall or impact. So we're going to do a little bit of well, go on to the next slide, please. So we see what some of the general criteria that we can think of for selecting anticipatory actions would be: one, whatever we are looking into, it can be activities that are defined based on the triggers that we've developed, right? Next one, please. Whatever activities we select, we want to make sure that we're preventing or mitigating the negative impacts or coping strategies to the extent possible with the time we have. And finally, we want activities that can be implemented before the peak impact of a disaster. Okay, so pay attention to these three criteria here, because we're going to put you all to the test in this next activity. So again, in general, when we want to select our early actions for anticipatory action, we want to make sure that the activities are based on the predefined triggers. They are helping that community mitigate or prevent that suffering that could happen from the disaster. And it must be feasible, viable, as well as desirable to be implemented before the landfall of the hazard. So if you're going to construct a mega infrastructure, before a cyclone, is that something that could be done? No, why not?
You need a very short time to make all the preparations. So you have to you have to do something that is doable in a short time.
Yeah, so the answer here is no, because we don't have enough time, right? So we need to think about this. Do we have enough time, whether it's 3 days, 5 days, or a few months leading to it? Okay, is that clear? Any questions? So now we're going to put you all to the test. So can we go to the next slide, please? We're going to divide you into 3 groups. And for those participants online, Shona will help us figure out the breakout groups, or if you're going to do it as one group. We're going to give you 10 minutes. If you finish before, let us know, because then we can save some time. Each group is going to be given a hazard, okay? So we're going to have floods, drought, and cyclones. And your group, what we're asking you to do is select 3 to 4 potential early actions that you can think of for that particular hazard. Of course, you don't have the exact trigger and the science here, but just imagine that you are an organization and you are selecting some potential early actions for the given hazard. Which ones would you choose? So we'll give you 10 minutes. I'm going to divide you into groups. So if we can go to the next slide, please, so that I can show. I see that you might be enough to do the breakout groups online. Perfect. So here are the 3 groups. And I'm giving you the lead time so that you can imagine the activities that can be implemented within that time. Okay, so we'll have one group here, you 3. You will have cyclones, so a lead time of 72 hours. So what are 3 or 4 actions that you could take? We will have the 3 of you here with drought, with a lead time of up to 3 months. So think about, now you have more time, what activities could you think in terms of that criteria? And then 3 people here, floods, and we're going to say a lead time of 5 days. What are 3 to 4 actions that you can think of? We're going to distribute these papers here. So one per group, one color per group. And just write, you don't have to write a whole paragraph, just maybe in 1 or 2 words, what those actions will be for your group, okay? So we'll give you 10 minutes, same thing for the online. And we'll reconvene in a bit.
Yes.
I'll let you know when you have 5 minutes left and 1 minute left.
So, yes, 4 things
because not like it's a cycle hits the whole country, general or different the country. Some parts are rural, some parts are urban. Depending on how wealthy the country is or poor the country is, the capacity to for individuals to respond or they need for an external agent to act.
I like where you're going with it because you're getting into the nitty gritty and the challenges. Oh, right. You know, urban versus rural. How do we, where should we do it? So, I mean, in this hypothetical situation, you can imagine yourself as an organization that's, I don't know, working in a particular province, as you wish, but just think about general activities. And I'm happy that you're with that critical lens as well. Here, we're good. All right. Excellent.
Teaching and wanting what ultimately at this stage more wanting information. We just look at the 5 days before.
Just 5 days.
Just 5 days. So typical deals that are companies that are.
Right, yeah, you can assume that. We have, and now you're doing it, you're the organization, and are like, oh, what should we do? ¿Vale? Sí, eso.
A los gentes que hacen la que decía, ahora es el tiempo para, para tener algo más alto o
Serían como acciones como
In the meantime, you can select who's going to be the person in your group to present. Okay, yours was very obvious. Okay, here? Yeah. Okay,
They will be back in 42 seconds. It's a countdown.
Ah, okay.
Few seconds.
I mean, you can. We didn't even consult you.
All right, so pick your top 2 actions that you would like to share. We won't necessarily be sharing every single one, but pick your top 2. And our participants will be coming back now. So we're going to start presenting from the in-person group, and then we'll have each group present your top 2. Then we'll move on to the online groups as well, top 2 for each hazard, and then we'll wrap up this part of the session. So, hello, welcome. All right, so let's start with cyclones, lead time of 72 hours. What did you come up with? Top 2.
So the top, we thought about messaging. So some sort of wide broadcast on alerting basically people, whether they live in urban or rural areas, about the disaster that's about to hit. And then our next one would be preparedness in terms of shelters. So making sure that people are aware where's the nearest shelter. And of course, in there, you know, preparing things like food and non-food items for people.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, drought. 3 months leading to the drought. What can be done?
So we started by exposure mapping to understand the intensity and the geographical area that will be affected. And then based on that, we will need livelihood mitigation strategies, depending on the area, livelihood differences between pastoral, non-pastoral communities, etc. And then our second action will be programmatic planning. So it will be important to reinforce wash services, distribute multi-purpose cash assistance, and will be quite important to understand and leverage communities' coping strategies, because droughts are also usually historically they happen, and communities are usually the ones that know best how do they cope with that. And of course, create social awareness and understand the impacts of evacuations. And usually when they are drought related, they will be long-term. So it needs to involve as well host communities, etc. And we were just missing setting the right coordination structures.
Thank you. So as we see with drought, you have more time. It's you also have different pockets of time that you can have different types of interventions. So if you read the manuals for implementing, you know, monitoring and evaluation for drought, I highly recommend. It's really interesting because you are monitoring in a different way than the sudden onset hazards. All right, floods. What can be done, let's say, with 5 days? What did you come up with?
So for so for our top 2, our first one was very similar to cyclones, sending out alerts and warning, giving the public the opportunity to move if needed, if they're in an area likely to be affected. And the second one was kind of working with the emergency services to make sure that they're activated and have everything, any specific needs they might need, be it special life-saving capabilities like water rescue teams, or high volume pumps, or flood barricades to put in the right places.
Okay, thank you. So just remembering that the life-saving things can be part of your preparedness, when we talk about the anticipatory actions, what are those actions? Are we distributing non-food items? Are we doing anything? But then anything that's life-saving after, that's during and after for response. So then that would be already on the other side. So just to clarify that as well. Okay, online groups. Let's start with 1 or 2 actions for cyclones. If you have anything different from what has already been mentioned. And feel free to unmute yourself too. It would be great to hear you, but you can also put it on the chat.
Mary, may you feedback for our group?
Yes, I can do that.
Thanks.
Thanks all. So what our team in the room have, and top 2 actions are early warning messages through partnerships with mobile network providers to the community. And the second was evacuation, using the SOPs that would already have been developed, including, so, but there were many other suggestions as well, including distribution of cash, and then shelter where the community would be evacuated. Over to you.
Excellent. Thank you. Great additional examples. Drought.
I would just go ahead for our group, and please colleagues add if I miss out on anything. So we actually discussed quite a lot of points, and just to start with, we found it interesting that it's possible or relevant also to take into view the different dimensions. So we discussed humans, animals, and nature. And there we had different early actions. For example, for humans, communication was also one of the major points. So early warning, raising awareness, maybe even community trainings, because there's such a long lead time of 3 months. Or also handing out multi-purpose cash. For animals, one of the main points was handing out vouchers for animal feed, so they survive the drought. And on the side of the nature, we discussed, for example, drought-resistant crops and adapting the farming system a little bit. Yeah, I think those were some of the main points. And another big point was also improving the water infrastructure, for example, by deepening boreholes or drilling more boreholes. And for example, easier action would be just pre-positioning and pre-filling water tanks.
Great, thank you. And again, for drought, because it's slow onset, you do have time for maybe rehabilitation of infrastructure such as boreholes. Whereas the previous example that I gave, if this was for floods or another hazard that's sudden onset, then we wouldn't have time, right? So for drought or for slow onset hazards, keep that in mind that you had the time to implement. Great. So floods, let's go for 2 examples, and then we can start wrapping up this session before lunch.
Hi, so maybe I can give 2 examples. Pretty similar to what everybody else said, but I think what was in those 5 times, what we thought would maybe most feasible was the pre-positioning also of emergency supplies and communication. And the other one was, I think, preparing in terms of maintaining like the canals, unclogging canals, making sure that water can actually flow off, and raising levees, like with sandbags, and preventing the flood to like trying to mitigate the flood.
All right, great. So just a minor comment here. Pre-positioning training for sudden onset hazards, you're going to be doing that probably in your preparedness phase, not within the 5 days to act. What I want us to remember is that within that lead time, within the organizations that you're at, remember that the funding is also traveling to get to the country. Many times it's in a regional office or even headquarters. So the fund is traveling, and then for you to be able to implement those actions. So actions like pre-positioning and training communities within the sudden onset hazards, those are going to happen in the preparedness phase, so that when you activate, then you're actually distributing items, evacuating people, and communicating these actions. Does that make sense? I just want to make sure, because remember to think about the parameters that we talked about, the lead time that we have to act. And is this then, you know, are we talking about long-term resilient development, or these activities that can be done right before the landfall of the hazard? All right, so if when in doubt, go back to the criteria and see, does it check all of these? And are these activities, we didn't talk about here, but should you go ahead and, let's say a cyclone diverts, we also have activities that we don't want to regret. So even if we've already mobilized communities, we have the no regret mechanism that the activities still go forward, because they will still help these vulnerable communities in some shape or form. And we didn't mention the stop mechanism, but if you haven't mobilized the communities, we can still stop and pivot if necessary, but that I'm getting ahead of myself. So join one of our courses and we'll get into the nitty-gritty of it. All right, next slide. So here are just some other examples, and probably many that you've already mentioned. We talked about early warning and evacuation. So this is for the sudden onset hazards, reinforcement of vulnerable housing and structures when we're talking about cyclones. So these are things that can be done within 48 hours leading to the hazard. For example, distribution of wash items, non-food items, and cash-based transfer, also using social protection payouts. On to the next slide, please. For the slow onset hazards, again, we have early warning for exposed communities, livestock, etc. We mentioned borehole construction, reconstruction, rehabilitation, distribution of drought-tolerant input, fodder production, cash-based transfer. And again, with drought, there's, I would say, maybe more of an opportunity also to learn along the way and make the adjustments in the process. Next slide, please. So a few of the key messages from this little section that we had is, remember that when we're establishing the framework, it can take up to 2 years to establish. We want to collaborate with people. We have the general steps that go from conducting a thorough analysis to developing an early action protocol or anticipatory action plan. And from that point onwards, then we monitor. Eventually, there will be a trigger, and we act and then capture the lessons learned. Next, please. So again, when we're selecting the forecast-based actions, the activity that we just did, we want to make sure that they're based on the triggers, that we know the lead time that we're going to have, so that we can implement these actions before they happen, before the disaster impact. And of course, they need to be relevant to the context of the community, the needs, so that we can mitigate and prevent the negative impacts. We also want to develop this anticipatory action framework, making sure that we're collaborating, coordinating, not reinventing the wheels. And to the extent possible, it's very important that we work with the governments and eventually integrating it into the existing systems rather than working in silos. And so with that, we've covered, let's say, the 70% of our training on the foundations of anticipatory action. So far as we wanted you to get to is understanding how it's different from traditional humanitarian response. So maybe give a show of hands. Is that make sense of where anticipatory action fits in the cycle? Yeah. The building blocks for it to be considered anticipatory action. So we're talking about triggers. We're talking about the early actions based on the criteria that we talked about, pre-agreed funding mechanisms, all falling into an EAP or an AAP, and our evidence generation mechanism. So it's a lot, hold things lightly. And this is all nice in theory. When we come back from lunch, if you choose to come back for the last part, we're actually going to be playing some games so we can also understand the reality on the ground and how difficult it can be to work and collaborate together. And we're going to be discussing the challenges of implementing anticipatory action and where the hub, the anticipation hub, fits into the equation and how you can be a part of it. So I don't know if there are any questions or if we're all ready for lunch. Okay, I do see that there was a message for drought, so just want to acknowledge that on community-based psychosocial support to manage anxiety in the face of looming drought due to the likely impact of drought and their lives and livelihood. So noted. Thank you. All right, so thank you very much for your engagement, for playing a little bit with us. Again, apologies if at any point in time anyone was triggered. We are trying to, get everyone to empathize a little bit and understand the why we do what we do, and bring us a little bit back to the ground on how things unfold when we have a disaster. Reach out if you have any questions. We will take a 1 hour lunch break. So we'll be back around 1:45. If you want to play a little bit around 1:45, 1:50, we'll start playing, and then we'll get into the last part of the session. So thank you all. Thank you to the online participants for your engagement. I hope this was a useful session and that you walked out of here with something. So, all right, we'll see you after lunch, hopefully.
Thank you. Very well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you coming back up?
Yes, yes.
Perfect. Good.
Yeah, no, it's
Relatively easily, well, not relatively easily, but people can understand the case that you're making.
But nowadays,
This is like a directive microphone, so
Yeah, but we use this one, right?
yeah, this one is good, yeah. But for here, you have to speak in the microphone like this, and when you stop talking, you.
Okay. Okay, so we'll be using this one.
Is it on?
I believe so. Hello, hello? Can you hear me? Online participants? Yeah,
Yeah, we can hear you.
perfect. All right, so welcome back and apologies. Here we were waiting for a few more people to come. So we're a cozy group back from lunch. But I think we can start in the interest of time, and I know that our online participants have been there waiting. So we're gonna go ahead and go into our second part of the session, in which we're going to be discussing a little bit more on the challenges around scaling anticipatory action, integrating it into government systems. So Alessandra is going to give that part of the presentation, and hopefully we can continue this dialogue and ask questions. As we are a small group, it allows us to also go more in depth. So that's the opportunity here. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and let you start with your part. And
I think that there must be a couple of, I think, slides for the presentation. So just to introduce myself, and thank you for those colleagues that are coming back after lunch. My name is Alessandra Gilotta. I'm part of the Anticipation Hub. And yeah, so, we have gone through the exercise this morning. Thank you. We have looked at the technical aspect. We have appreciated the time that it takes to develop a protocol for anticipatory action. And so now we want to expand a little bit more on the challenges, but as well, the opportunity, as we said, we see them here as well at the hub, and also our role as a network, as a convener, to support various actors to come in together and scaling up this work. Maybe if we can go to the next slide, Marius, thank you. Yes, if if we maybe can think about and discuss it online and as well here in the room. You know, you may remember we spoke about and we did some exercises. Just I guess to get us thinking and get our thinking going. If you can think of any challenges that we can face, not only in anticipatory action, but most importantly, and this is what we really believe, to making sure that this approach is really embedded within the national systems and frameworks. So if you may have an idea you want to contribute, or colleagues you want to write online, what do you think probably could get us started in terms of you know, some ideas and input that we can maybe elaborate and discuss. Participant online, you can also just raise your hands and speak, because yeah, we are a smaller number, or also colleagues here. If you have any experience or thought that you want to share, would be welcome.
Okay, maybe I can start.
Yes, please.
Okay, I think one of the first challenge is the shift of mindset, because it's logical for people to help when there is already a disaster that has happened, but to make them understand that to it's better to be on the proactive, preventive side than the reactive. It needs really a different kind of mindset, and I think there has to be more examples of anticipatory action that works, that benefits not just the those who could be affected, but more importantly to see it also in numbers, in terms of you can save more in the preventive side than to actually doing the response. And then in the Philippines, actually there is a current law that is being pushed to be passed on the imminent disaster law that includes anticipatory action. It is difficult to mainstream that because people are so used to the response recovery phase of any disaster. Another thing also is, I think, we have always been talking about nexus, but it has not really been done in reality. But I think the nexus happens really in this, like you're doing, because disaster as a disruption of development. So when you are anticipating this disaster, that's part of development, ensuring that when disruption happens, people are able to recover fast. So I guess I don't know. I don't have any answer on how that mind shift can really happen, but I think we have to start somewhere. And in terms of scaling up, I was just actually in a conversation with someone who's also with the German government, and I think the scale up will only happen if we have a good number of case studies happening globally of how this anticipatory action can really help. In numbers, meaning on with especially with the limiting resources, and then also as the anticipatory framework looks like, it's really working together. So that is also gonna break the silo system of our current system, the humanitarian system. So it's very important for us to really understand how we are willing to break out of the silo system for this to work.
Yeah, I think if we kind of go back to the bit from before lunch as well, and we kind of looked at those three elements of what anticipatory action is, I think one of the challenges, especially when scaling, is probably something that's not limited to anticipatory action, but the idea of funding, of getting people to agree to put that funding in place. But also if you're ring fencing it and saying these funds will only be released when these triggers are activated, ensuring that that pool of money isn't drawn on for other events. The hope that it will never be needed, and that it is a usable pool of money for other things, kind of defeats the purpose of agreeing that funding.
thank you for colleague online. We see some of your contribution. Yes, and we will speak, I think, about some of those elements, defining and activating common triggers, thresholds. That is tied, of course, to you know, funding made available and being released, data collections and analytics, not in terms of the colleague was saying of technical capacity, but also building trust in the numbers. So yeah, absolutely. Michael, please just unmute yourself and jump in.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I had my hand up before. Actually, I also wanted to speak about funding, not only because of the paradigm shift, because it's still a rather new approach, but also considering the current situation. And then I want to raise another point, which you also just touched upon, which is capacity building, because as we learned, it's a rather new approach, and it also requires new skills in identifying triggers, assessing potential impacts, and devising appropriate actions. I think it's not the main challenge, but it just does indeed also take some time, I believe, to build this capacity on a scale. Yeah, so that's just another point I wanted to contribute.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's also fair, you know, what Michael and the colleagues here just mentioned. It's double-sided. It's mindset shift and change for sure, and also, you know, ensure that we have got the right skills and capability in place then to really, you know, enable anticipatory action. And it's true in a way. I mean, it started this approach started as a pilot by having some you know, champions and donors, you know, willing and happy to give some seed money for some, you know, project that started in 2014 across a number of agencies to really see and appreciate the learnings and the potential. And however, you know, 10 years have passed, and you know, 5 years ago, the hub as well was created with really with this intent and energies and disruptive you know, intent of really catalyzing and bringing different stakeholders together, because we have seen the potential of the approach, and as well the learnings that are there, and they're fair, you know, for agencies to recognize and learn. And it could really be in a paradigm shift, particularly in these days and moment in which, you know, fundings are becoming even more constrained. And indeed, funding could be an enabler and as well as a bottleneck at the same time. So we will definitely discuss some of those into details. Can we go ahead with the next slide, please, Marius? Yeah, current challenges. There you go. I think if you can click one more, we will see the various headings for the images. And also, you know, I'm glad that the colleagues spoke about numbers, because that is also a nice segue to the numbers that we'll see later, and the report that we do as the Anticipation Hub once a year that shows the overview of anticipatory action across the globe with you know, data information coming from those operational agencies, is that we have definitely seen, and it's great to see, you know, an uptake of this approach altogether across the year, though recognizing that it's very fragmented, because different agencies, you know, might still develop their own framework and protocols in isolations for specific, you know, provinces and areas in which they operate. Oftentimes they're not coming together. There has been actually also on the positive bright side last year, and we were there as well in South Africa, at the back of the El Niño drought activation. That was a huge one across the South Africa region. That was really changing also the mindset, because over $3.3 million, if I'm not mistaken, were made available across the region and across partners. And so that has been already a fantastic you know, approach in which agencies have gone to, and as well government in those areas, because we ought and we want to speak about them and with them, because if we are really you know, scaling up and really give the full potential to anticipatory action, we need the mindset, we need that you know, framework and that, you know, kind of structure, if you will, at national level, by which then, you know, it can be, of course, coordinated and implemented by many actors operating in those contexts. But it's definitely, this is the mind shift and change that we are hoping as well to see, because if we are able to work alongside and be in support and provide technical assistance to government, then we don't touch you know, the millions of people, but we could go even way more beyond than that. We will be looking really at the national systemic level, which will, you know, will imply a completely different and scale of magnitude. And yes, you know, everybody spoke about funding. For sure, it is definitely that it's an element that provides to not for the approach to be as inclusive as we would wish it to be, because you either as an organization have specific funding allocated to that as and when needed. There aren't that many other funding mechanism and opportunity available for other agencies that they don't have this internal mechanism, and now we can, you know, push and make sure that, you know, we advocate and we speak about this, and we're trying to convince other to do more on this end.
If I may add one thing on the funding also, besides the challenges of access to funding and getting more funding to scale anticipatory action, I would also add the element of how the funds are moved and dispersed, because that's also a challenge. As we were speaking before the lunch break on the lead time for certain hazards, a lot of the times it's from the trigger that we're expecting for the funding to then be dispersed. And as I mentioned before, sometimes it's sitting in a regional office elsewhere. And I remember, just to give an example, doing a tabletop simulation exercise in a country office where we were simulating and it was like, okay, so now we activate. So the trigger is activated and this whole movement is moved by people. And it could happen on a weekend. It could happen during the holidays. And so at one point in that simulation, we were like, okay, so now it's activated. Someone has to, in that case, it was to call the regional office, then to get in touch with the bank to do the transfer. And this was a simulation for a cyclone. And so then the person was like, and now we wait for 3 to 4 business days for the fund to arrive to the country. And that was the moment that everyone's eyes were wide open, being like, we've already failed. So how do we also look at funding and the available technology nowadays to have it done efficiently, or even prior to a trigger, but when the season starts that it may or may not trigger, so that this doesn't become the bottleneck or what impedes us from actually implementing anticipatory action. So I just wanted to add that, because these anecdotes, you know, we can laugh about it now, but these actually prevent us from actually doing what we intend to do. And you might have the perfect AAP or EAP, and it stops there because of the funding bottleneck. Sorry.
Yeah, no, and that's absolutely valid. So thank you for bringing that into the conversations as well. Also looking, you know, for anticipatory actions in various different contexts, especially fragile, in which, you know, the particular constituencies or is already maybe being affected by a conflict. And then, you know, what would means also, you know, implications from a health crisis or a weather-related crisis on top of, well, what is the fragility in that context, and also how anticipatory action can really, you know, play a role in those contexts, bearing in mind that, again, you know, as we saw this morning, anticipatory action, it's one tool at the disposal of organizations and agencies. It's not the only one, and what it makes sense. And also, you know, it was mentioned, having the right capacity and capability and expertise for the development of those protocols, but also, you know, in conjunction and in coordinations with the meteor services, the other meteor services and others, and the technicality that they are required for it really to be implemented at scale. We can move on to the next slide. Thank you. Yes. Yes, and this is yeah, there are a few ones. There you go. Yeah, thank you very much. And that was an example that also we wanted to share as the Anticipation Hub and with the partners that we are working. It is a journey. It's something also as the hub we have been working and investing over the years. Last year we had hosted a global event in Berlin, our Global Dialogue platform, in which one of the topic was really how best we can mainstream it with government, and we had quite a number of those representatives join the conversation, which was important. And this is an example coming from the World Food Programme about the good practice of how they have gone about integrating and working with government to include anticipatory action in the public policies and framework. So it's really about assessing the feasibility, and it's about bringing together the offices and departments within government that are responsible, and really trying to set up a governance, systems that could be used as a mechanism. We know, for instance, I think in Mozambique, it's a good case study that that we can bring into the conversation, because they had brought the government and working together, particularly I think on one specific hazard, and really fostering that coordination required with the government structure, but then went over that route and included more risk cost altogether, and also really how to embed these coordinations mechanisms, and also see within the social protection system and a national level, what it makes sense for us to be coordinated, embedded, and then build that on top of what is already ongoing. And of course, I think as we said this morning times and times again, it's really keep on evaluating the impact, the monitoring, bringing those lessons, bringing those case study that in a way we can use as well to continue push for the policy and advocate, but also learning from experiences across contexts and across agencies. So next time around we can do it better, we can do it differently, we can do it faster. So there are good cases, and this is just an example of one of them. We can move on to the next slide. Yeah, this is what we have been speaking so far in those 20 minutes about anticipatory action being extremely fragmented across actors. That the government leadership, it is extremely important if we want to not only scale this approach, but this approach really to be sustainable in the long term. Yeah, and having anticipatory action really on and embedded in national and local systems and structure, it's definitely, we believe, the way forward, and keep on generating the evidence, the lessons learned, the case study. So there is also a lot of opportunity for cross-sharing, learnings. We have done that, for instance, as I was saying last year in Southern Africa, across the various Southern Africa development community, and also having the government speaking among themselves and see what it has been the approach that has been working, and also having that transfer knowledge and experience across is definitely important. Thank you. We can move on to the next slide. And this is, someone spoke about the data. This is our global overview report. This is the report that we produce across the agencies that work on anticipatory action, including including national systems, that gives you one snapshot on the framework that have been developing within the given year, and also the activation that have been done. And so, you know, the anticipatory action in actions that happened last year. If you click on, we will see the numbers. Yes, thank you. So last year in 2023, these are the data from 2023. You know, we have seen more countries, you know, having anticipatory action. We moved from 35 to 47. More frameworks available, which, you know, shows the investment and the uptake to really put the effort and energy and time into the preparations, with over 10 million people being covered by anticipatory actions, with pre-agreed funding went up to the level 148 million. So now what we said, and you know, we launched the report HMPW here last year, when it was in May. I mean, you know, what is the key message here? The key message that, you know, anticipatory action is growing, which it's good, and something where we are already, you know, very proud and optimistic about. However, it's far still from what, you know, the approach can be leveraged. You know, if we think about the backdrop of humanitarian needs that are keeping on growing at a pace and a magnitude that we haven't necessarily seen in the past, you will see that we are far lagging behind, and we feel there is much more that this approach can be used and utilized to reach even more people. We can go to the next slide. Yes. Okay, and here in this area, we wanted to have an opportunity to speak about the anticipation a little bit more, and specifically for those colleagues and agencies that they don't know us. Also feel free to join in and ask questions. So we were set up as an initiative, as a convener about 5 years ago, and what we are doing, it's really like we have been doing today and this morning, it's really bringing different organizations and stakeholders together to allow and amplify the work that has been done, but also bringing colleagues together to exchange and learn, because we believe by doing that, this is where, when people meet an organization, exchange, this is where the learnings happen, and when this, you know, there is interest and opportunity to learn and discuss how things have been done. And so we do that through a number of different type of activities. You know, we do these sessions. We have online community of practice in which we bring together colleagues with specific team that we discuss on a technical aspect of anticipatory actions, again, with the view of presenting some learning, presenting some report, but also having a discussion going and also see what other practitioners think about. We do that as well through the Dalo platform. These are some of the events that we run across the globe, globally and regionally, that bring stakeholders together within the region to foster that exchange and that learning. And we work as well with the working groups. And here we are really bringing together, you know, many stakeholders, of course, the organization, those that they are on the ground, but also most importantly, the research institute, the Hydromet, the university, the donors, because we believe we need all of them together, really to enable the approach to be scaled up further. We do a joint advocacy and policy, again, with our number of partners that we work with. We have over 154, and everyone is really, you know, invited to join and participate, because this is, you know, our aim and ambitions, and we're really here as to, you know, foster and create the space for practitioners to be exchanging more about the work of anticipatory action in general, and as well it's, you know, out there for the community. This is our structure and the way that we work. I think definitely the most importantly is that we have a number of different partners that I mentioned. The working group at the moment, we have got 9, and tomorrow we are going to launch another one in the afternoon. They are looking at specific thematic angle of anticipatory action. So we have one on anticipatory actions and locally led action. We have one on the meal. We have one on protection, gender and inclusion, on earth observation. We will be launching one tomorrow on the humanitarian displacement and anticipatory action. So they are, again, another opportunity for colleagues to come together as a community of practice, to share experiences and to develop guidelines and tools as and when it's deemed necessary. Also mentioned in one of those working group, the conflict and the multi-risk, they come up together with the International Water Management Institute and us as the hub, also to develop a toolkit for anticipatory action in fragiles and conflict settings. And we will be launching that in Asia. So as well, the opportunity to bring those practitioners at a global level and also try for them to be connected with the regional technical working group that they exist, and really being able to support those practitioners in the ground, for them to be implementing a new approach or a new guide, and how that can be happening. We also have a website where we host, of course, informations and documents across different agencies with the spirit and, again, an intent of really sharing what is the knowledge out there, the latest guideline, and really make it at the disposal for everyone who's interested in anticipatory action. Maybe we can go to the next slide, Marius. Yeah, in a nutshell, these are some of the things that I said and I mentioned that we do, and also, as Christina and Marcela have also mentioned earlier this morning, we have also developed learning trainings and modules that we will be looking at rolling out in region, and so that for us as well, this morning was an opportunity for us to test it. Because we believe this is another way that we can build the capability, but also change the mindset of some of those important stakeholders and practitioners that we want to engage. Please do come to our website and sign up to our newsletter, so you can get, we can keep you posted on anticipatory action activities going on that our partners are, doing and leading on. Also, most recently, in the framework within the grant bargain work, last year there has been the grant bargain caucus on scaling up anticipatory action was set out, and we as the hub were invited, and we provided the functions of as a technical advisor to the grant bargain secretariat. The outcome document has been signed by the grant bargain signatory, just naming it because the grant bargain is still, within the humanitarian community, the only group that brings together, the donors, the humanitarian practitioner on the ground, the UN agencies as well, representative from the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement, as well with local organizations. So it's the only unique place that can do that. To help, humanitarian work to be more efficient and transparent. And so for that was another key milestone at both political level, and having, the signatory agree on the definition of anticipatory action that we have been talking about in the morning, and also agreeing to having much more transparency on tracking the funding that go to anticipatory action, both for what they are called the build money, so the money that really enable to build the system, the capacities, the BOPs and the building blocks, and the fuel money that we use, partner use, to do anticipatory action and really unleash this early action response. And, we will be, as the Anticipation Hub, we will be, tracking those funding, and also with really the intent of providing more transparency within the system, and also fostering, supporting those donors that they have, committed to, a percentage of the funding to anticipatory action, which is, something that has been very much welcome, because we need leadership in stewardship. Is also, we want other donors, coming online and supporting this initiative more. And I'm not sure. Yeah, I think that was the end, what we wanted to discuss. If colleagues online are also here in the room, you can think about a moment throughout the session that we have been running today, of an aha moment or an appreciation of something that you have learned today or you have discussing today, and an appreciations or a concern you might come away from this session, I think also would be useful to share and discuss together. And I think within that one, we will be then slowly then wrapping up and closing the session.
Actually, I realized also that part of the apprehension, I guess, to make it, especially for if we're talking to governments or duty bearers, is the no regrets policy aspect of an anticipatory action. Because definitely for them, like, how do we account for that no regrets money, in other words? So maybe that's something that we can also try to figure out, because I think a lot of the things need to be translated in how government systems work for them to understand and appreciate why it's important. So I think it's not so much also on the impact itself, but to communities or affected people, but how it will also impact their work and the system that they work in terms of accountability and all these other things. And I think also what I appreciate about the whole thing is that I think really anticipation will provide greater chances of people to be more resilient, than just we keep on responding and going, but we respond, people recover, but going back to the same ground zero situation. So what we want to see is that people recover in a better state than how they were when before they were affected by any disaster. Thank you.
I think I'm just starting to get to grips with what anticipatory action is and the scale of the challenge of kind of convincing people for adopting this model. But I was, I suppose, thinking of looking at one of the recent graphics there of the map and kind of showing the country frameworks and what types of different frameworks are in place for different countries. And I suppose I'm just also kind of wondering about the challenges of having country-based frameworks for some of these events that we've discussed, like droughts and flooding and cyclones, which are often quite regional as well. So I suppose these are questions I'm just starting to ask myself as well.
I don't know if anyone online has an aha moment, appreciation, or apprehension from this session. I see Michael.
Yes, so one apprehension that I got during this session, although I knew about it before, but I think is the importance of meal, of collecting and generating robust data, and the importance to focus more on that in order to produce evidence that anticipatory action does work and does reduce suffering, help save lives and livelihoods. And I think that's just a very important aspect in scaling AA as well. And I wanted to share also a thought of appreciation for this workshop and for your methodology. I think it was, although it was, how much was it now? More than 3 hours. I think time went by really quickly, especially with all those interactive formats. So I really enjoyed that. And I think it was very helpful to better understand things and just to get involved. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Anyone else online would like to share? Okay, I see here. Yeah. Okay, so can you scroll down? I say my appreciation. I really enjoyed the interactive method too. It helps me to retain the information a lot better. Many thanks. I will need to leave for another meeting soon. Thank you very much for the very useful workshop. Wondering when we will have reached to the recording. Okay, great. So I'd like to share an appreciation for the active engagement of both in-person and online participants. It's been a pleasure having you. And this is just a little teaser of what our learning modules are looking like when we're bringing them in person. And so just a bit of information that we will be doing our rolling out of training of trainers. So if you work for an organization that might be interested in learning more about our methodologies and how we can spread the word on the foundations of anticipatory action. And also we will have specific training on different thematic areas within AA. Please do reach out to us and we would be happy to collaborate as that's, yeah, part of our DNA and what we do. So spreading the knowledge and also gathering these lessons learned. So that's my appreciation. I don't know, Alessandra, Christina, over to you. And there are more. Okay, so many thanks for the wonderful session. This is my first ever AAP training. I have only heard of the word. I'm interested in learning more from experts. Thank you very much for organizing this. You're most welcome. It's been a pleasure. Over to you.
Yeah, I also wanted to, take the time to appreciate everyone and their participation, both online and in person in this, longer session. And, do trust us that your feedback, it's really enabling us to tweak and refine, those content, but also as an opportunity to have a teaser and let you know that those are happening. So also do reach out to us as and when we will be working on the planning. And also those critical questions, I think, are definitely useful in the way that we can, talk about as well the failures and what needs to change and what we need to learn as a collective, community that works on anticipatory action. Because unless we are honest and open about it, and we also, we won't be moving forward. And also back to your question, and we have the global overview reports, in our here in the building. You won't be surprised to see that, in 2023, when we did the report, and by the way, we will launch the report for 2024 in May, so in a few weeks' time, and so stay tuned. The majority of activation were for drought. And this, if you can remember what we discussed this morning, also exemplified the reason why probably there are more of those, but also we want to push organization to try and also develop more for rapid onset emergency. And we know already that, in a classic humanitarian response, it's already difficult as it is. So doing it in anticipation probably even more. And we have it as well by sector of intervention. So those that are available for you to use. Thank you. Oh, yes. Do you want? And yeah.
What do you want me to do?
Do you want to share anything? And then I think I understand.
My words of appreciation. I think it's also that you took the time to, sit through a 3.5 hour session. In the moment that there are a lot of other sessions which are interesting as well, and giving us the room to explain it, to have the time to explain it, because quite often we need to explain it in 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and it's, it's cutting it short. So it's really nice. And for me, it's also, it was quite helpful again to see how difficult it is often to see the difference between preparedness and anticipatory action. I think that's one really important part, and also where we can improve our learnings and to support it. So that's from my side, and over to Alessandra.
Yeah, and thanking everyone. Also, just letting you know that we are running another sessions on Wednesday morning. I think 9 o'clock, and so we are going to give an opportunity, and again, there will be a lot of interactions and interactivities to discuss together how we can, scale up anticipatory actions in this new context of humanitarian reset. So come forward with your thinking hat, with your heart, because there will be another quite dynamic session. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't know how to switch this off. Now we move the chair. And I hope to follow obviously to see you both around. I know you also understand.
Yes, yeah, the
From ours.
map action.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't find there's a hell button here, but it's a lock button thing.
I think